Hey, Jeff.
Michael, can you hear me?
I can.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Steve. Hey, Tom. Hey, Mark.
Hi.
Nathan is in the process of joining us. It just says joining. So,
Mark, we missed you. You're muted.
How's
there
that?
he is.
Did you miss us as well?
Yeah, I said I thought about running, but I'm not actually a town, I don't live in town, so.
You could just buy your house and then you'd be all set.
Yeah, well, actually, I could move into one of my 7 units, I suppose. Yeah.
Hey,
It's
good
just an
evening,
excuse that you
everyone.
don't live here.
I love the lake. Every time I show that parcel, I think, what am I doing, It's absolutely beautiful piece. And then I'll walk the person and go, oh, I love this. I'm like, me too. What am I doing? Yeah. You can't live well, actually I just bought a house in Spain, so I guess I can live in 2 places anyway.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Where in Spain?
It's on the coast of a town called Alicante, which is about 370,000 people. It's got all the beautiful architecture, and I bought 20 minutes outside the main portion of the city, so I'm not right in. I'm realizing how much of a country boy I am when I buy a 10th floor penthouse, and I'm like, 10 floors, it's up there, but the view is beautiful. I haven't been there since I purchased it back in July, so I'm going to take off in January till March to enjoy it. There's a lot of work involved trying to get ready to go on a trip like that, though. It's just amazing. I still own some real estate, as you know, so it takes a little bit to get it done. How's everybody else on the board doing?
Good. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for your patience in getting this started tonight. I see we do have a quorum, so I will call this meeting of the Shutesbury Planning Board to order. And I'll note that the meeting is being recorded. Also designate Tom to sit in as a full member, Tom Seifert. And we'll start out with public comment. Anyone want to make public comment?
How about a private comment?
No, can do. Robert, welcome.
Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
Well, it turns out I was late too, so you didn't miss anything except public comment, and nobody wanted to say anything except Steve wanted to make a private comment, but I said, well, we can't do that.
Inside jokes are allowed, but not private comments.
Right. Landowner education and guidance. I don't think that we have anyone here for that as of now. All right, so next on the agenda is going to be Mark Whiteman with his special permit. And so we have this question about the conservation restriction. And Mark, before you even get started, I am curious as to whether anyone on the board has much of a. So he's been working with the Conservation Commission. He's reached out to us over the interim. And so there's a condition in the special permit that says that he will submit to us for approval the conservation restriction. There's a similarly worded condition that states that, no building permit will be issued unless there's a conservation restriction that's signed by I believe it's, I don't know if the Secretary of State, and meets the standards of Mass General Law, right? So my question is do we really care much what's going on with the restriction, and we just want to kind of like see, hey, we more or less want to essentially endorse that he does have a proper conservation restriction that meets that's signed by the appropriate authorities in the state and meets the statute, or do we want to have a look at it before he goes to get that approved and then give our blessing at that point? Does anyone have any idea about this?
I do.
No.
I mean, I think looking at, I'm generally speaking, I don't have concerns. I mean, it seems like looking at the special permit, hold on, I just had it up here a minute ago.
No.
Where did it go? That's, anyway, it just, do you have it? Can you share it, Nathan? The wording?
I can share, yeah. Do you
I had it on my screen, but I know I can't find it. I was just gonna say something about it.
yeah. I can get it up in a second. I'm just gonna take
Oh,
a
here, I
minute.
got it. I got
got
it.
it?
Hold on.
Okay.
I think this is the right one.
I've got, I actually, I know I've got the, I pulled it down from what was recorded, so I hope that's,
It's,
you got it, all right, so.
okay. I'll probably make it just a smidge smaller and then we can maybe get it all. But I was gonna just comment on this part, that it would, so the CA is the conservation analysis, and which I presume is the precursor to the conservation restriction. And just that it had the appropriate level of detail under consideration, and locates the resources of concern. It's sort of, this is a question, or is it?
Well, that's one of our findings, and that's based on the,
Oh,
report,
yeah, that's under
whatever
findings, right?
document was submitted with, along with all the stuff.
There they are, sorry,
That's okay.
yeah. So it's,
Oh,
there,
right here.
yeah, okay.
Go back up to number 7.
Yeah,
And this is actually a draft, I believe,
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
I don't think it's changed very much, but, so I can look at mine before you stop sharing, and I'll tell you if,
Okay,
yeah, yeah, so that's about the same, right? The applicant shall, within 2 years of issuance of this decision, submit to the planning board for their consideration and approval a conservation restriction in compliance with MGL Chapter 184, sections 33 through 31 through 33 for all land on the parcel outside of the building lot. 14.3 plus or minus acres.
Yeah.
and then number 9 brings you to what was submitted, yeah.
yeah. So I think my only comment, sort of question, is just if, we're just trying to figure out if it complies with, MGL 184, section 31 to 33, which I would assume the Concom is aware of since they do these things. So I don't think there's much substance that we have to, the ability to comment on, just to make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. So that's sort of a question. And I don't know if you've talked to Beth at all, Nathan.
I haven't talked to Beth. Well, I guess, so Mark, why don't you talk to us a little bit and tell us where you're at in the process with the Conservation Commission and what you want from us tonight?
Absolutely. So my understanding of, and you have it perfectly on the screen here, is that number 9 brings us to the next step, which is until such time as a aforesaid conservation restriction is approved by the Secretary of the EOEEA, the conservation area shall be subject to the draft conservation restriction document dated 8/15/2016, attached here to as Exhibit B. So that's this big thing, big thing, but it's like 15 pages long, 20 pages long, and it is a document that was created by my engineers at the time and then submitted to the board, and obviously made a portion of this approval. So I've got a few questions in here that I'd like to go through with you guys. And again, I think that what you've just said is answering most of it, is that, and what I had written to you folks in one of the emails is that I think that from what I'm getting from this, the intent was to be able to make sure it meets the requirements of Master General Law 184, sections 31 through 33. And if it does, then whoever the holder of the restriction is going to implement, I don't want to say have their will, but they're going to discuss with me what they believe, how this thing should work, where there are areas that have some flexibility. One that came up in our conversations between myself and the Conservation Commission was that there's a couple different ways to go. I could actually give the land to the Conservation Commission along with the restriction, and then the land is, as I understand, taken off the tax rolls, and they pretty much are going to discuss or to decide how it's going to be handled. The other, which is my choice, is to keep the 14 acres plus the 4-acre building envelope in my ownership, paying taxes on all 18 acres instead of on just the 4 acres. And anybody buying from me would have the same. And then my interest in that case, because of paying the taxes, would be to keep the conservation area restricted to the homeowner or the owner of the property making decisions as to who has access to it. And the Concom agreed that it made sense. This is the way this thing is written, this draft is very restrictive. I mean, it says no new walking paths, no nothing. I mean, you can walk where the walking paths are, you can go out and look at birds, but it's basically hands off on the conservation land. And I don't see a lot of flexibility in that in the draft that was written. I'd like to have a little flexibility in there to be able to have people be able to create additional paths and things of that fashion. But the Conservation Commission and I have met twice now, and we had a walkabout also on the land, and they made some good comments. But the biggest one was that they were interested in doing this. They think as the Conservation Commission for the town of Shutesbury, it's sort of their obligation to be able to help landowners with this sort of thing, and to be able to help land be restricted and conserved. So they want to make sure that there's some sort of remuneration so that it's not coming out of the town's pockets. We talked about some sort of escrow amount that I would put up. And if they had to hire someone from outside the Conservation Commission to walk the boundaries once a year to make sure there hasn't been any encroachment, that there was money there to pay for that. At the same time, I suggested, why shouldn't the Conservation Commission get paid as, when you do a perk, you pay the town for doing the perk. When you do a lot of things, you have to pay a fee to have them done. So if the Conservation Commission is actually going to do the walkabout once a year and check the boundaries to make sure nothing is being disturbed, they should get a fee for doing that. So I don't have a problem with that coming out of that escrow amount that we're discussing. The other that they had asked for, which I thought was something I should have thought of ahead of time, is that they want to have all the property boundary lines, or excuse me, boundary corners pinned and staked. Now, all the exterior boundary had been pinned years ago. So I sent my surveyor out, and he staked all the exterior boundary lines, and we put ribbons on each one of the stakes so they could be seen by the Conservation Commission, anybody else that wants to see them. And then we also pinned the approved 4 ± acre building envelope, for lack of a better term, and put the pins and then stakes at the pins so that you can see all the areas of the boundary of that building envelope. And what that does for the Conservation Commission, as they explain, is that they can then see easily if the owner is encroaching, the owner of the building envelope has encroached into the conservation area, or if a neighbor, which I hadn't thought of, is encroaching on the exterior boundary of the conservation restriction area. So I thought it was a good move. I was very fortunate that I was able to get a surveyor out there in less than a week. I think I'm running out of favors, but that was a good one. And he got actually got 30 Yellow Jacket stings, but he actually got it done. So it is all staked out and ribbons around the stakes. So anyone wants to go over and take a look at it, they can see where that building envelope is now. That'll help with the sale of it as well. It lets people know where they can and can't build. So we're moving along. I'm supplying them with what they ask for as quickly as I can. And they are the first to bite. You know, I haven't had any success with the nonprofits that I've gone towards. So I think it makes sense to continue to move forward with the Conservation Commission. They haven't asked for anything that I thought was outrageous. I mean, they wanted $5,000 for the escrow, and I figure it's a 1 hour trek around. Even at 125 or $200 an hour, it seemed 5 sounds a little high. So we're going to work on that number. And that was just one member who had suggested the $5,000 because he had seen something for, I think a restriction down toward the Boston area. So I think prices are a little higher there, but we'll work through the numbers to make sure there's an escrow and make sure there's always money in that account to make sure that they can do what they have to do over there. So the only questions that I had, and I think that you've already answered it, that I'll work it out with the Conservation Commission as long as we're staying within that Mass General Law. This draft that was presented and approved by you guys will be what we'll use, and then if anywhere where there's a point on here that hasn't been solidified, the Conservation Commission and I will work it through, and then once that's finished, they sign the restriction, and then I think it goes to the Select Board next, or to you guys next, and then the Select Board, and then to the Secretary of State.
Yeah, I think I was I was going to reshare this. I'm just having a problem with it. I think it comes to us. We'll just get this back on the screen and see if
I would
can
think
pull
you'd
this
want
up.
the Concom's signature on it so that you can see that it's a done deal there, and then you guys have to give a blessing.
Yeah, so I think in 7, the way I'm reading it is that it's the approval of the conservation restriction. So I think you could probably move forward, finalize it with them, and then when it goes from the draft to the restriction, we just approve it. But I don't think it goes to the Select Board at all. That's
Gotcha.
my read of That's my read of 7. I don't know if anyone else has a different opinion, or if it goes.
Well, that may be, the Select Board step could be legitimate and needed, and it's just outside the purview of this permit
That's true.
in terms of, just generally obtaining a conservation restriction. The Select Board may need to approve it because it's the town of Shutesbury, essentially, potentially acquiring land, or at the very least acquiring a lien on land, right? So it's they may have a process in place where they do it. Did the Conservation Commission talk about the Select Board needing to approve it, Mark?
They didn't. The engineer's draft document has a page in there for the Select Board signatures. I didn't know if that was an optional thing, and they put it in to make sure if you needed it was there. But there is one for I know the Secretary of State has to sign it, or the Secretary of Environment has to sign it. It's in the permit. So it at least has to go there. So my thought was it should go to wherever it has to go to, and then it should be presented to you guys fully done, so that you're looking at it showing that these entities have said it meets Mass General Law. So it's not on you to try and figure out whether that's the case or not. And you're basically looking at going, okay, they've signed off, it meets Mass General Law, then it's our requirement to sign it. And we are looking at.
Bless you.
Ooh, bless you. We're just over a year since I received the final approval, and I will be gone for 3 months. So my hope is that I can work with the Conservation Commission to get I'd love to get their approval, work out a document with them, through this draft that they're happy with, have them sign, and then I can go through the next steps by Zoom while I'm out of town. And hopefully by the time I get back, or soon after I return in March or early April, I can have gone through the steps, and hopefully it's in front of the Secretary of Environment. I'm told it takes months to get through the Secretary of Environment, and I don't have any connections at the town or at the state level anymore. So It's not gonna happen as fast as the surveyor, so I'm hoping I can figure out some way to maybe get one of our local congressmen or senators to help push it through at the state level, but, yeah, I haven't done any donations lately, so I don't know if that's gonna happen. But I think that's the plan. See if I can get the Conservation Commission online in the next couple of 3 months before I take off. Get them signed and then put it through the next process, whether it has to go to the select board or not, we'll figure that out. And then, it'll go on from there. So I think what you've said makes a lot of sense to me, that, I'll work it out. There's only like 3 items in there that, there's any leniency whatsoever, one way or the other. So I'll work those out with the Conservation Commission. And then, once we get all the signatures, come back to you folks and present the finished document.
That sounds reasonable, right? It seems to me that, it's obvious that you may encounter some pretty serious delays at the state level.
Yeah,
So having this clause of, coming to us and, we say, yeah, it's, we approve it, it's kind of like a intermediate step that just kind of says, hey, I've done what I need to do. It's with the state, I've done everything I can to ensure that it's in compliance, and, we can kind of give a nod and,
that would be great.
Right. I think that's the idea.
Yeah, that sounds very fair and helpful, because again, I thought that this was something I would leave for the buyer, the property, because they could choose their own nonprofit or whoever they wanted to hold the restriction. And then as I started delve into this thing, I realized how complex it was and time consuming. So I don't have the engineers that I use, SVE no longer have a Massachusetts licensed engineer. So I'm sort of on my own. I've been trying to find somebody to pick this up for me and do it, but I'm getting through it. It just takes a little extra time. And I do have the gentleman who was at SVE, 2 of them, who I've been able to talk to be able to help me walk through this. And now with the Conservation Commission almost on board, I think we'll get there in time. But like you said, if we've got it all done, Concom signed off on it, says they feel it meets Mass General Law 184, 31, and 33, or 31 through 33, then you guys can take a look at it and say, yes, we're telling you we're on board, you're all set, you met your requirements, and now let's just wait until the state signs off on it. That would be great.
And Mark, I would just say, you can't have total fun in Spain, so you got to do a little work somehow.
I feel a little embarrassed even bringing it up, and I'm a blue collar kid from Greenfield that a lot of people work a lot harder than I've worked, or as hard as I've worked. Most haven't made the mistakes in life that I've made, but I feel very fortunate. I really do. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think how lucky I am to be able to afford a nice house here and have something where I love being. I've been there 5 times in 4 years now. So yeah, if I got to work a little bit while I'm there, I'll suffer through it.
All right. Well, eat some cheese and, whatever other good stuff they have over there too. I just think of like Ernest Hemingway is always talking about eating cheese. That might have been gelato. Yeah, all of it. Get after all of that stuff over there.
But every time I go, I actually, I eat really well. In other words, things I enjoy, like pastries and gelato, and I lose 5 to 10 pounds because you're walking everywhere. And I won't get into the food is not like it is here. It doesn't have all the poisons that we have in a lot of our processed food. Even with fats, they only allow 2% trans fat inside of anything that you're purchasing. So you can't get any more than 2% of the fat as trans fat. They don't allow the dyes and the colors and all the rest of the stuff that can cause problems. And I just, I feel healthy when I'm over there. I might have something to do with laying around in the sun, on the ocean too. So anyway, I will, if I have any questions prior to leaving, I'll give you a holler, but I think we're on good ground now. And next stop, I'll send Conservation Commission a letter to see where they want to go next. And I will copy you guys if it's okay on the letter.
That's fine. Yeah. We look forward to seeing some documents.
I look forward to supplying them. Great. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. You have to, Mark, you have to include a picture of your house too, your new house in Spain.
Oh, I'll do a whole video for you right now, but
No.
Yeah.
Let's put our, but, maybe we'll, if, yeah, depending on how, quick everything goes, maybe we'll see you, on a Zoom call from Spain or whatever. You have to,
Well,
you have
there's
to get
4
up really
bedrooms
early
over
in the
there.
morning. It's like it'll be in the middle of the night. That's not gonna
Yeah,
work.
it's 6 hours difference. Yeah, but that's all right. But it's 4 bedrooms over there, so it's family friendly. Help yourselves.
I'll keep that in mind, Mark.
Construed as a bribe. I'm
I'm
sorry.
gonna call you up. I'm gonna call you up.
Yeah,
Be like,
exactly.
hey, Mr. White.
Never happened. Didn't say that.
I'm here with my wife and kids.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
again,
thanks,
folks.
Mark. Look forward to hearing from you again, and best of luck finalizing that with the Concom, and assuming that goes well, then later on with the state. So,
Sounds great. Thanks again.
okay. Next on our agenda, we have the minutes from 7/8/24. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of July 8th, 2024.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jeff. Any discussion? I know it's been a while.
Oh.
Just a quick typo in my name. I just remembered that in
Very
the
important.
attendance list. It's SIE, not SEI, but
Well,
not a big deal either way.
well, Michael's got to dish it out a little bit for all the times that somebody didn't capitalize the D. in his
Oh.
name.
Yeah, spelling is a good thing for your last name.
Yeah, you can probably see where I mean if you look at it.
Michael, are you sure your name is spelled correctly on your Zoom window?
On my Zoom window, yeah.
Okay.
It's the mail that's the issue.
Okay. So I will I'll make that little tweak. Anything else from anyone? All right, I'll call the roll. Raymond,
Aye.
Weston,
Aye.
Bressler,
Aye.
Seifert
I,
with an IE. Dick
I,
Hero,
Hi.
and I'm an I. Okay, and almost passes unanimously. That's great. I got a couple other minutes like that where I said, oh, I'll make a couple tweaks, and then I got to go back and find those two.
And currently, we don't have a new minute taker, right?
Yeah, currently we don't. Yeah, it seems like there's a few little changes going on in town. But we may have a new land use clerk before too long. But chair updates later on the agenda. So
Okay.
all right. So I'm just gonna leave that up. All right, zoning act changes as they pertain to Shutesbury zoning bylaw. As you may have seen in a flurry of emails, they updated the zoning act. It's the Affordable Housing Act. I want to say the Affordable Care Act, but it's the Affordable Housing Act. And it affects accessory dwelling units. The main thing is it says you can't have restrictions on owner occupancy, I believe, right? There may be a few other tweaks. Michael sent out some stuff. And I think he's done a little bit more digging on this than I have. But it's why don't you go ahead, Michael, and
Sure.
walk us through what you have so far.
So I haven't done any rewriting yet. What I told Nathan I want to do is just sort of share this with everybody, and then if everyone's good, I can do a draft for next meeting. But so as he said, and you guys probably saw, in the law change, and the two things are what I'm sharing here is the now official definition. And so there's things in the law that we have to change, but as an example, under number 2, it says in terms of the gross floor area,
That's the other one.
900 feet or half the gross area. Ours is currently 800 feet, so that's an example where we'd have to change it. And then one of the other ones, it's very obvious if scrolling down to this next part, is that you can have restrictions on owner occupancy, either in the principal dwelling or the accessible dwelling. We have it that an owner has to be in one of the two units. So, you know, and then there's another part about parking, which is down here, which I have to look at how we would word it. But right now we require a total of 3, presuming 2 for the primary and 1 for the accessory. So, you know, there's some tweaks. So this is to share what it is, and then let me just quickly where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Okay, hold on. Okay. Can you guys see this one okay?
Yep.
So this I put together, I pulled from all the places in our zoning bylaw where it references accessible dwelling units. So this part should be fine because you can still do a site plan review. And currently we require site plan review by the ZBA. The dimensions are basically the same, but there's a reference here about accessory apartments. And then this really generally does not pertain, but it's 4.4-2 is basically where it talks about ADUs. And the way it is written now is that all of the conditions 1 through 10 have to be in compliance in order to get approved in town. So you have to have 45 square feet. It has to comply with setbacks, etc. Number 3 is what we'd have to change because it talks about owner occupancy. Curb cuts, I think, are probably okay as long as we're compliant with the parking spaces. Number 6, it says, you'll see, it says 3 off-street parking spaces. And I just got to figure that out in terms of making sure that we're talking about requiring 1 for the ADU, regardless of how many is in the primary. I think we just have to change the language a little bit. This is the 800 square feet that now has to be at least 900 square feet. And access is fine. And it can be in external places like barns and garages and stuff. So there's not that much. Ashley's here. So there's not that many changes that have to get made. The one thing I'll say is that what the law says is, as long as you're complying with the new changes, you can have additional restrictions. So as an example, in ours, and if you ended up reading the Conway one that Jeff said, you know, there's a requirement that an accessory dwelling unit, if it's a separate dwelling, has to sort of fit into the architecture of the area. And so like that's something that's not, we can add it. It's not, the law doesn't say you can't do that. We just have to be able to sort of comply with the other stuff. So I'll answer questions as much as I know, but I haven't dug in as much as I usually have, because what I wanted to do is say, are you guys fine with me based on this, working on a draft and sending it out before the next meeting? And then we can sort of talk about if there are things we want to add or change, because we can be more expansive than the law. Like we can, let's see, how does this work? Instead of the 900 square feet minimum, we could make it has to be 800 feet, or keep it at 800 feet, because then 900 feet would comply. So we can be more generous than the law if we want to, but there's decisions we could make. But
Wait, don't we have it at 800? The law is 900?
yeah. So it has to be.
But he said minimum. I think he meant maximum.
Yeah. Anyway, it's a bad example, but basically the idea is there's things that the law points out in terms of the size and the parking and owner occupancy that we definitely have to change some things for. There's other things in there that we currently have that we can discuss if we want to keep them. So I think what I would do is write something up that's pretty straightforward, make the changes, keep what we have, send it out, and then we can have a discussion about what we want to tweak. Nathan had asked me about the timing of this. And so the law doesn't go into effect until February 2025. Presumably, we won't have annual town meeting till April or May. And reading what Jeff Lacy had written to us, which I shared, there was a webinar that he watched that we weren't able to watch. Even if we haven't accepted the bylaw yet and updated our bylaw, starting February 2025, we have to comply. So it's not like we'll be out of compliance. If someone says, I want to do an ADU in March, whatever the law is, we have to do. It's just that when we get around to doing it, we can then approve it and it'll be part of our bylaws. So we'll never be out of compliance. It just won't be that our bylaws will be updated, if that makes sense. At least that's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
So.
If we don't, obviously, we're not going to be able to get this in for a special town meeting in November. So as a result, we'll get this done for annual town meeting, and there's going to be a period between February 2nd when this goes to effect and whenever we hopefully get the residents of Shutesbury to pass this in town meeting. And if we get applications at that time, the ZBA will be obligated to waive portions of the Shutesbury bylaw that don't comply with state law.
If you have a question?
If you're gonna go off and do a draft that where our zoning bylaws comply with this new state statute, if what I would ask, and anyone else is welcome to weigh in, is to add things that you think we might want to consider and just make them in red or a color, so they're new, they're new items that we'll be ready to discuss in the next meeting.
Sure. Well, let me ask you a question back. Because the easiest way would be just to make the changes so that we're in compliance and we keep the stuff that's there that's not out of compliance. So that would be the straightforward stuff. Would it be helpful as I dig into this and look at what other towns have done? If there's good ideas that we might want to consider, should I either write them in and do the red notation or make footnotes or something? I mean, I think pointing out things that we might want to consider. But would you prefer I write them in and just highlight them, or just sort of list them somewhere?
No, well, I'll answer for myself. I think it's a little more streamlined if you just put them in now, identify the ones that are new, and as we read through it, we can then discuss it, which if we want to, adopt some of those new ones or not.
Cool. Other
Yeah,
people's thoughts on that?
I go along with Steve and appreciate your doing what you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any ideas about what they would want to tweak if we're in here anyway? I mean, this kind of aligns with what we've been talking about for the last on and off for the last year or so. Steve? Are you raising your
don't
hand?
have anything off the top of my head. I will say that a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it came up in the planning board whether we wanted to change our minimum square footage for accessory housing from 800 to 1,000 feet. And personally, I was against that. My first house in Shutesbury was 750 feet and 2 floors, plus a dry laid stone foundation. And we had myself, my wife, and a child and the business going out of that house. Long way. It's a long way of saying I think 900, if that's the state statute, is fine. I wouldn't suggest going beyond that, above that.
Anyone else?
I would say if people have ideas, in the next couple of weeks, just email me, because I would agree with Nathan, like when you've had these conversations about how to make housing more accessible. I mean, I think the change in the law is part of the bigger state effort of how do you create more housing for people. And so this is one way to do it. And if there's, I mean, what's interesting, just as a footnote, I think when I looked at this about 2 years ago, when we started the discussion about small houses and stuff, there were under 50, maybe in the around 30 communities that allowed accessory dwelling units. So this is a huge shift because all these communities that didn't allow them now have to. And we were in the minority of communities where we already allowed them. So we're doing tweaking where I think that's, it's a dramatic thing. But if there's things that we can tweak to make it easier for people, and I don't know what they are yet, but I invite anyone to email me if you have ideas.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is that, if we're not rushing to get this in for November, then we're just like, all right, we'll deal with a little bit of a gap that we can take a little bit of time. It's good to be getting on this, now in October as opposed to, some of the stuff we've been kind of at this point in like, February or something like that, right? So,
I wanted to make a brief comment. I actually talked to someone who has a small house in South Deerfield, and I said, well, what are the regs in South Deerfield? She said, they're really unclear, and it seems to be fine as long as a neighbor doesn't complain. If a neighbor complains, we have to get rid of it. And so far, no one's complained. So it's much better for everybody involved to have clear regs. So my friend, actually the daughter of my friend, doesn't have to live in a situation where she could be forced to move because of a neighbor not wanting her there. So thank you, Michael.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess I'm just wondering, without thinking about it too much, whether this would be an opportunity to bring in a bylaw with regard to tiny homes, that someone might want to have an accessory dwelling unit that is in the nature of a tiny home, which would be a lot more affordable, whether or not this would be an opportunity to do that.
So I think, the way the accessory dwelling unit definition is, which we already had, but it can be part of an existing primary dwelling or it can be separate. So the one thing that Jeff Lacy had wrote in his email to us as a suggestion was, I think the distance between the primary and a separate accessory dwelling unit is 75 feet. Jeff was suggesting, making it like 100. So one way to do that, Robert, is not necessarily to call out special tiny homes, but to sort of maybe expand the distance so that, and that's something we can discuss in the group, but like how far from the primary dwelling should an accessory dwelling unit be without, it's still, I mean, and this is part of the compliance with the rest of the setbacks. So if you're on 2 acres and say we allow 200 feet from the primary dwelling, as long as it's within the setbacks, it's not really encroaching on any neighbors because it's still within the setback. So that might be more accommodating for people. I don't know the answer, but I can think there's probably some of those things where, because if you have a separate dwelling unit, it's got to be a home unto itself. Like it has to have a bathroom, it has to have a kitchen and all that kind of stuff. I'm not quite sure, after looking at it, last year or the year before, what differentiates a tiny home from an accessory dwelling unit, except for probably the size, is my sense. But you should look back at what, you and I sort of did research on. If there's something pops, let me know.
Okay.
yeah, I think the tiny housing is, also going to have to, it's an issue of conforming with the Board of Health regulations pertaining to septic and the well. I don't know what about a tiny house would fall out of conformity with the existing bylaw except, I do believe, don't we have, some language in our current zoning bylaw that pertains to, that, you know, if you're doing it like an existing, building or something, it has to be like an existing barn or something. If it's a detached building, it needs to be something that was existing or,
Yeah,
There's stuff
yeah.
about trailers and mobile homes.
yeah, that's the big
And
thing.
it's pretty restrictive. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you guys know it. Like you can't occupy it for more than 14 days.
Yeah, that is the big difference. I think Ashley's right. Is that, like, a lot of tiny houses are built not on foundations. They're intended to be mobile. And so if you have wheels on something and it's not on a foundation, then it becomes a mobile home. And, I mean, one thing we could look at is what the definition of a mobile home is for
Mm.
Shutesbury.
or what's the
And
difference between a mobile home and a tiny home?
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So if we define a mobile home, it could be different from a tiny home. I have no idea how we would differentiate that.
Or maybe we could
And
allow one mobile home,
huh?
as long as it's mainlined into the septic system and properly wired and what have you, right? Or is
Yeah,
that
I
just
mean, well, I think it's worth the conversation. My hunch is that whoever, way back, because I think it just got adopted forward when we did the bylaws, that there was a desire not to create mobile home parks.
well,
And
mobile
so,
home parks are one thing, but you could limit it to one, right? So it's kind of like,
yeah,
I think
Well-
generally people aren't going to want to like stick a mobile home on their property. But it's the idea is, if someone is retired on a fixed income and they want to be able to you know, bring in some revenue, they can set up their mobile home and rent it out. Or maybe if some people here have some folks that are their parents are aging somewhere, and rather than sticking them in a home somewhere, they want to stick them in a trailer in their yard. It's that's the idea there, right? It's a obviously, I mean, that can be now, where you had one house before, maybe you have, one house and a mobile home, and it's not someone's parents or someone's kids that they're bringing back to live close with them. It's just I don't know, other people, but it's, I mean, yeah, it's,
If Shutesbury approved or adopted Appendix Q, which is the International Code for Tiny Homes, an accessory dwelling unit could be something that would be 400 square feet and would have special requirements, which would be modified from the general housing requirements. And I believe Massachusetts has adopted Appendix Q, and it's subject to each town deciding whether or not they want to approve having tiny homes in their municipality.
Does Appendix Q change regulations around septic?
No, the Appendix Q mainly is focused on the different requirements as far as access, as far as ceiling height.
Mhm.
um,
Okay.
bedroom dimensions, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's building code stuff.
Mhm.
yeah,
And if I'm not mistaken, tiny homes do need to be on a foundation, not on wheels. That's one of the differences, I'm pretty sure.
no, that could
between-
be either. A lot of them, when you look, Steve, a lot of them are actually on wheels. So I think that would be up to us to say whether we want them on a foundation or wheels, like in our definition, like that's something we could discuss. And I mean, the other thing about tiny homes is that it could be a primary or an accessory dwelling unit. I mean, I think based on our private conversation, my gut is that having it be accessory makes it like more affordable. Because if you're gonna do all the costs of septic and water for a primary residence, and you might as well have more square footage, but as an accessory dwelling unit, it seems like presumably there's a little bit lower cost because you're adding on.
Well,
That's just
what happens right now with Shutesbury zoning bylaws, if somebody wants to build just a tiny home on a lot that is it conforms with the other zoning bylaws, you know, they can do that. You know,
yeah.
We just don't say the words in the bylaws, but there's nothing that prohibits it, right?
correct.
Yeah.
As folks have said before, they still have to conform with Title V, you know, Board of Health issues, as far as septic and that, you know.
No, I think that's true, and I'm not. Robert, are you certain that there's actually any, you know, obligation or need for a town to adopt our attachment Q for it to be in effect? Like, I feel like the state building code is just, you know, I feel like it's applicable to our bylaw as amended, right?
Yeah, and I don't know, Robert, I remember you thinking that the state adopted it, but I think you pointed out that they got close, but they didn't, which I have to go back and look. It's,
It was confusing, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's a good guideline, and it's an international guideline, so I mean, it is the starting point in terms of if we wanted to go there, we could reference it and save ourselves a lot of time and effort to say if a tiny house is going to be allowed, it has to comply with the specifications, blah blah blah.
Yeah, yeah, we could do it independently of whatever the state did.
Hmm. Yeah, you could just explicitly call it out as an allowed use, right?
Say again, Nathan?
Have we circulated Appendix Q amongst the planning board members? I'll be pleased to send it out.
I
Probably
mean,
a
I think
long
it was a
time
while
ago.
ago. You could just send it out again. That'd be fine, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gathering that maybe what I will do is take a first stab at the housing thing, and then we can use that as a jumping off place to think about if we want to weave in tiny houses or something like that, where we could add it.
Yeah.
It seems like this is the vehicle, like rather than bring forth tiny houses to town meeting, we
Yeah.
use the change in the law and say this is where, I mean, just like the state did, this is not about accessory dwelling units, it's about affordable housing. So in a
Yeah,
similar way, we could do the same thing if we
I
wanted
like
to.
that. Yeah.
Now, I don't think there's anything in the bylaw that says what are the parking requirements for a single family dwelling. But I do suspect that probably is in the building code.
I don't know if it's in the building code because it's not the building. I mean, it is. So in our accessory dwelling unit, language it says it has to have 3, but I don't know if that's just assuming the fact that you'd want to have 2 for a primary residence, but it doesn't require it. I don't think that's required. We could look.
Housing options. Compliance with health, yeah, all dwellings shall comply with regulatory requirements. Two off-street parking spaces for each dwelling unit.
Okay. What
So, yeah,
section is
so
that?
except as provided in the accessory dwelling unit section, which says you have to have three, it requires two per dwelling unit, right? So having at least three complies with state law, so you don't have to touch that.
Cool, okay.
However, it may be.
You're looking at 4.4-4?
Yeah, so I don't think we have to change it at all. I don't think it makes sense to, you know, like, for example, if a house has three off-street parking units and they want to do an accessory dwelling unit, I don't think it makes sense for us to say, all right, well, we actually want four. Right? Because you can't require more than one additional parking space. So that would, technically comply with the state law. But it's more restrictive than we currently have on the books, right? So that's not.
Well, the only thing I would, the one benefit I think to calling out that an accessory dwelling unit has to have at least one is that it's conceivable that, just say there's a homeowner and they create an ADU, and all of a sudden their kid moves home and they need three parking lots, and so the homeowner has three, and then there's nothing for the ADU. Like, that won't work because the ADU is required to have one. So it should say, and maybe I'm just imagining, like, the way it's written now, I don't know if that's open to interpretation and it's not clear enough. You know what I mean? It might be fine just the way it is. I think you're not wrong. I'm just trying to figure out, like, how someone could misinterpret.
It says at the end of the parking thing in section 8.2 that the approving board or building inspector may require additional off-street parking spaces if such spaces are deemed necessary for safe use of the property. So it may require.
Yeah. Where are
Approving
you?
board or building inspector.
Ashley, where is that you're reading it?
I'm on page 30.
Okay.
Section 8.2 parking.
Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah.
Except in the case of accessory apartments under subsection 4.2
Okay.
-2.
Right, so that's a broad thing on parking applicable to any use. And it says the minimum is two for a dwelling, right? So if you have a two-family house, you need 4 spaces. If you have a two-family house and you get an ADU attached to it, then it's 5 spaces, right? I don't know if we can do an ADU with a two-family house on our zoning bylaw. Anyway, I was so that seems pretty straightforward. Seems like we're good there. Michael, you'll probably think about it more and have more suggestions, but so we can consider whether or not we want to remove the owner occupancy requirement for other multifamily dwellings. One thing I would certainly like to see, at the very least, is I noticed, when Jeff sent an email, I think it might have been just to Michael and I don't know if the whole board got that, but in the Conway bylaw, they have owner occupancy as well for some of their stuff, so some requirements, but they also have a clause that allows you to designate a family member as like a I forget what they, like a stand-in owner or, something like that. So essentially, like, if, your son or your brother or any family member, is living at the residence, then you're meeting the owner occupancy requirement and not, falling short on it, which I think is a very reasonable thing to have in there, which I could have swore that we had it in our bylaw, but then I got a question on it, at some point from someone that was trying to do one, and they had gone and put their house into their son's name for other purposes. And then now they want to do an accessory dwelling unit, but they have this conundrum where their son is the owner. They're not going to be living there, right? They had other issues aside from this, from what I understand, but it's, I think it would be a good thing to add. Do you understand what I'm asking, Michael?
Yeah, I think I'm just looking at, because, hold on one sec. So I was just looking at the law, and what it says is, additional restrictions may be imposed by municipality, including but not limited to additional size restrictions and restrictions or prohibitions on short-term rental as defined by the law. And then no municipality should unreasonably restrict the creation or rental of an accessory dwelling unit that is not a short-term rental. So it seems to me like someone could argue that requiring sort of a responsible known party to be on site in one of the units goes against the intent of the law.
No, I'm
Even
talking
though
about, not, we can't do it for accessory dwelling units, but I think, on the current bylaw, we probably have owner occupancy, requirements for multifamily, dwellings, like
I don't
two-family
know.
duplexes, things like that.
I'm not sure, but what you're saying is for non-ADUs that are more than a single family, loosening them so that it's not owner occupancy, but it's known responsible party occupied.
Well, yeah, it's, for the purpose of this bylaw, the owner shall be defined as, one or more individuals residing in the dwelling who hold the title and for whom the dwelling is the primary residence for voting and tax purposes. Said owner may designate a legal relative as a life tenant who may
Yeah.
occupy the house in the owner's stead. Certification by affidavit shall be provided by the owner. So that's the language that is in the Conway, bylaw on that, right? And so adding something like that for, anything not covered by the ADU law that we have already. If we have any owner occupancy requirements for multifamily housing that's not ADU, I would like to add that in at the very
Okay.
least.
Yeah, I just did a
Um,
search. I didn't see it come up anywhere, so,
Okay.
but I'll look. I'll see. Uh,
Yeah, I would be surprised if we had it for ADUs, but not for two families. But, that's just maybe the way it is. So,
yeah, I'm not. Uh,
I mean, if we don't have it, we could add it.
yeah, well, the only thing it says here, I just found, it says for two-family 12, well, this is, what is this? 4-4.4-3, two-family and multi-dwelling units. So it says for two-family dwellings where any of the dwelling units are rented or leased, an owner must have their principal residence in the town of Shutesbury. So you don't have to be on the property, but you have to be a Shutesbury resident to lease
Oh.
out a multi-dwelling unit.
Interesting.
Oh, and then it actually, yeah. Uh, it actually does have owner occupancy is the same for the next point in that. For multifamily dwellings where any of the dwelling units are rented or leased, at least one dwelling unit must be occupied by the owner of the property. The owner must own the entire lot.
Yeah.
And in the case of a condo, yeah, so there is that requirement. So we would change that to a life, whatever it was.
Well, yeah, either the owner occupancy or a life tenant, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'll check that out.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And I think I would encourage everyone, if you have the time to try and look at this and brainstorm a little bit and come up with any suggestions you can think of. Either get them to Michael or bring them to the next meeting. Both with respect to the reading of the law, it's more or less straightforward, but it's always good to make sure we're doing a deep reading of it and not missing anything. And then like we said, this is our opportunity to do what we can for tiny houses, affordability, because it's the I want to say flavor of the month, but that's not really the vibe I'm going for. It goes hand in hand with what the state is doing, right? So
It's a window of opportunity.
it's the window of opportunity, right? This is the moment. So that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you. All right, I think we'll move on. So we're good with that. I mean, is there anyone else that wants to be more active in working on this? Okay. Well, you got it, Michael. Thank you, as always. And if you need
My
any
pleasure.
support,
Team effort.
yeah, yes, it is. Let me know. All right, so I've got zoning act changes as they pertain to, oh wait, no, I'm sorry, ZBA special permit for 640 Wendell Road. So this is a just all right. As you know, we have not been with the land use clerk. Also, I think as it happened that Carrie, when she was our land use clerk, may have been the one that had access to the ZBA email account. At any rate, the current chair of the ZBA did not have access to the account, and they did not have it set up like ours, where emails to the account were being forwarded to all the members automatically. So they got this application and nobody received it, or things were kind of going through the cracks a little bit. So I think that because there are requirements for the planning board to have so many days to review, typically that just expires, we say nothing, they move on. But since they're under a rush, I would like to just kind of I mean, do we want to just say no, we don't have any further comment on it? Is there anyone that wants to look at it more than that?
Did we discuss this previously? I can't remember.
That was a different one. That was a different one.
Is this the one with the person who's wanting to move back from Tennessee? Is that the one we're talking
No,
about?
that's an accessory dwelling unit that was on Levitt Road by the center of town.
Okay.
That was a different situation. I see you, Tom, but one moment. The building inspector issued a permit for a building permit for an accessory dwelling unit that had not received site plan review. And the building inspector's office is supposed to know that. Shutesbury zoning bylaw says that accessory dwelling unit is a site plan review. but it was someone that was recently hired, and it's slept through the cracks up there. So,
Can I make a comment about this?
yeah.
Great. Actually, I know this land, and I know Russ. My understanding was that he's a carpenter, that he built this house with a certain clearance, and then 2 years after he built, changed. So from, this is my memory, from 15 feet to 25 feet, forcing him to move the garage into his backyard, basically. So when he originally built the house, he thought he was going to be able to put it, I think, 15 feet from the front. And now, because the law changed after 2 years after he built the house and sited it specifically for the garage, the law changed, forcing him to site the garage into his backyard. So that's my understanding of the situation. I've been to the house, and it's in an isolated road. And personally, I haven't been in contact with Russ for many, many years, but personally, I don't see an issue with him doing this, considering that this was his plan before when he sited his house, and I think he built his own house too. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Okay. And Tom?
Somehow Jeff read my mind because I was at the ZBA meeting and I know Russ a little bit. He's a neighbor like 6 houses away. And I would just underscore what Jeff just said. It's an issue of a 10-foot difference that didn't exist at the time of construction. Added to an argument for allowing this is the fact that the immediate neighbor to the north sited their house on the north side of their property, such that between that structure and where this garage would be a very large amount, relatively speaking, of just kind of woodland. So the isolation factor that Jeff talked about is really true and doesn't seem as though it would change over the 10 feet we're talking about between the 25 and the 15-foot setback.
Yeah, I think it would make it would allow him to have a backyard, and we're talking about a very isolated place on his street. And considering the circumstances, I would allow him to do this.
So we like to, instead of saying no comment, we can say, we support approving it.
Well, that would be my preference, but speaking for myself, that would be my preference.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think the ZBA would probably approve it either way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, really, it's
From the reading I had.
Yeah.
I agree. I think from what I read in the emails, it seems like it's not a very big deal to issue a special permit in this situation. If it was upsetting or problematic, it would be different for other parties, but it doesn't seem that way. And it doesn't seem like, the person is doing it out of any sort of disrespect for regulations. Things just changed.
So you all feel we're not setting I'm fine with it, but I just want to make sure we're not inadvertently setting a precedent that, when somebody else comes along that doesn't have the same rationale, allows us to deny that if we feel that it's inappropriate.
That is a good point.
No, that is a valid concern, right?
You guys see this?
Yeah, and again, I'm not at all against this. I'm in agreement with everybody. It's just a future, looking forward kind of a question.
No, that's a good question.
I guess what I would say is as long as we come up with what we feel is a sound rationale for this, so that if in the future a decision by the planning board is challenged, we have a good, we can pull out our rationale.
Well, the safest way to go, based on what Steve said, is not to have an opinion. And if Tom's correct, it'll just go forward. So presumably, if we're not objecting, we don't have, we're not saying anything, and therefore we're not creating precedent.
Right. And that's fine. It's ZBA who's setting the precedent, really. That's true.
Okay.
So should we have a motion not to have an opinion?
I think given the conversation,
I would entertain a motion for the board to say that I'll respond to John's email and say you know, the planning board does not have any comment on this application.
I think Robert should make that motion.
I like Nathan's language and endorse it. That's my motion.
Second. Okay, Michael seconds.
Can I add
Any
a quick
further-
discussion point?
Discussion, yeah.
I think the ZBA was looking more for why we wouldn't than why we would. So I think this is a good satisfactory way of doing that.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that there's a requirement to, you know, send to the board, you know, the ZBA has to send it to us and give us so many days to review it. And, you know, at the very least, we need to just say we're not, you know, we reviewed it and we're not, you know, we have no comment. So that it's like an answer and you don't have to let that clock run out. That's the minimum. So that's kind of like the direction, yeah. But yes, okay, so anyone else? All right, I'll call the roll. Bressler,
Aye.
Weston, Raymond,
Aye.
Pycroft,
Aye.
Seifert,
Aye.
Mike, DeCara,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Motion passes unanimously. I'm gonna to okay. All right. All right, that's off. Good. Thanks for bearing with me on that. I like to just get that done. All right, community outreach. I missed the deadline for well, we missed the deadline to get on the newsletter for fall. So I was just gonna mention that. And you know, I wanna send something out on account of the zoning changes, but I guess it's it may make more sense to kind of, I'll get something together for next month and we can review it and vote on it, because I don't have anything ready yet. And yeah, obviously it's getting pretty late here. And I know we're gonna go into executive session at the end here, so
I have
I'm
one
gonna
suggestion, Nathan. Just
yeah,
so, assuming we take the path that we talked about, so some version of a change of ADU maybe being more expansive. You know, we have to have a public hearing before town meeting, but
right.
presumably there will be a spring town newsletter. And
Yeah.
so you can do a write-up there, because, you know, turnout for the public hearing will probably be minimal. So in preparation to sort of educate people going to town meeting, that would be a better time to do it anyway.
Yeah, if that works with the timing, I would be good to wait all the way to the spring. I gotta, you know, get with somebody in town hall and figure out when the deadlines are. You know, this one kind of, you know, is after our last meeting, they sent out an email, hey, the deadline is October 1st. So, I mean, I could have just, you know, written something up and sent it in, but it was like, so we would need to be, having a good idea of when they're going to send it out and have it ready, the month before, so that, we don't get the, hey, the deadline's in a couple weeks, but then we don't have a planning board meeting for a month, so. But yeah, I'll do that. I think that's a good idea. If for some reason we need to have the hearing before that, then we'll just use town announce again. All right, so updates from chair. There was a few things I had. Let's see. I did go to town hall to engage in an interview for a land use clerk a couple weeks back. And I know that so this was with Matteo Pangalo. And that the interview more or less went well. And I know he went to the select board the next day, or whatever the next select board meeting was. Now I was listening to it a little bit earlier, but it's I didn't hear if there was a vote or not. So I don't know if that was finalized or not. I'm talking about it because I know that it was considered by the select board an open meeting, so it's not, that part's not a secret. I just didn't quite get through. I don't know if they were also talking about an administrative secretary. And it seemed like maybe they were talking about the land use clerk and then the administrative secretary, and then like gonna vote on both of them after all that discussion or something. I don't know. But I just kind of yeah, I didn't get quite through the whole thing and find where the vote was. They kind of went on and on a little bit. So,
So
but that's
we might have one.
we might have one. We might have one as we know, but and then so I don't know if anyone has been to the looked at the select board agenda for tomorrow.
Oh. Can I just add, they did vote Mateo in and
They did.
and Abby Hernandez as a secretary. And they did announce it at the last Concom meeting, I believe. But yeah, it's public.
Okay.
And you just didn't catch the right moment in the video. They did vote at that meeting.
I thought they must have, like, but
Yeah.
so I mean, not to
I
get
can
too,
bear witness to it.
yeah, no, I was just this was like in between when my workday ended and signing on here, and I just needed to get outside for a little bit, and I was trying to look at it real quick, and I was like, I just got to get outside and do something. Like I've been in the house all day. But anyway, I'm glad to hear that, Tom. Thank you.
Sure.
So looking at the select board, I see one of the last times on the agenda says town administrator transition plans. News to everyone? Yeah. Yeah. So that's a lot of changes going on, it seems. I saw another select board meeting where apparently they were interviewing an internal candidate for highway superintendent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
presumably Steve resigned, but that's
Oh,
all.
you don't? Oh, yeah, this has been announced.
I
The
just
highway
didn't hear it.
superintendent and did resign, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, there's some changeover in town hall or in town more broadly, including the highway department. So that's big news. And then I have had a few, well, so I've been receiving inquiries from Stephen Puffer, down on Levitt Road. That should be all set, but he was asking about, his property and, his lots. He got a special permit for a shared driveway back in 2003. And he got an A&R around in 2003 that, broke up his lots. They still meet zoning. It's just that there's a shared driveway that goes from one lot and provides access to the other lots because they're on that big slope. Right, so, and he got a letter from the building inspector, saying that it's buildable, but he was still wanted to reach out to the planning board and talk to us, or, talk to someone, and I just kind of looked at it, and I talked to John Thompson, who's chair of the ZBA, and we didn't see any issues, so we told him that, and he wanted to get that in writing, and I told him no, and that was because it's kind of like, without having an application before us, we're not really gonna, as a board, weigh in on something like that, right? Make a determination unless we have an application. I think that's generally the best practice. There may be some exceptions to that, but anyway. That was my take on it. Also, we approved an A&R, I want to say it was back in March on Lake Drive for Randall Smith. It was like right across the street from the Jones A&R we did, right? And apparently he's been going into town hall and asking for his Mylars, his plans, which, so I don't know. I've looked around, haven't been able to find those. So I don't know if anyone has, by chance seen them or has made themselves familiar with any of our records, but just an FYI. And then
Well, have you looked in the basement in the big meeting room?
I have, yeah.
Oh,
I don't know. I'm still gonna call Carrie on that. So we got that email. You all would have seen that, and I've called him twice, left messages on his machine, and then he hasn't gotten back to me. So maybe he found it. I don't know. But that was so that's it. Yeah, that's all I've got. No unanticipated business as far as I know. So at this point, I'm gonna turn it over to Michael. You guys are gonna get some yeah. I'll let Michael take it away for the last item on the agenda, and I'm gonna sign off here shortly. Yeah.
okey doke. So.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan, for all of your work.
Until next
Some of
time.
the,
Oh, I'm sorry, Michael.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I just remembered one thing before we go. Next month is another one of these. Someone stuck a holiday on the second Monday of the month again. So I would like to schedule the meeting for the first Monday of the month again in November.
I'm happy to say that golf ended today. So
Okay. Nice.
at least I don't have that problem next month. We'll see what else comes up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we're meeting on Election Day Eve.
Woo!
Oh, boy.
That's yeah, gotta don't want to be after election day. Not happening. Yeah, so it's November 4th. So,
Sounds good.
okay.
Cool.
All right, I'm gonna probably just post that before too long. All right, now formally.
Okay, sounds cool. Night, Nathan. So I'm gonna move that we go, the planning board enter into executive session for reason number 3 to discuss strategy with respect to litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's litigation position. Litigation specific to complaint received from Coles regarding the Shutesbury bylaw and Pure Sky, not to return to open session. So anyone want to second that?
Second.
Okay, so we'll roll call in. And just confirming everyone's in a private place where no one else can hear. Okay, so Steve,
Hi.
Robert,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Ashley. Ashley had farther to go to the door. And there we go.
Aye. Sorry, I had to ban my son.
Okay. Jeff,
Uh, I'm not sure. I was out of the room for a minute, but no one's around.
okay. No, you just have to say aye so we can go into executive session.
Aye, sorry.
Okay, we are in executive session. So this is relatively short.
Excuse me,
I'll- yeah.
do we stop recording for the executive session?
Oh, yes, thank you. You know,